Hello, everyone, and welcome to RBCM at Home. My name is Kim Goff, and I'm a learning program developer at the Royal BC Museum. The Royal BC Museum is located on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen, today known as the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. We extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live and learn on this territory. As we have many people joining us from all over the place, I'd like to also invite you just to think about the territory you're on today and the traditional peoples who have originally lived there. I will stop my screen share so you can see all of our panelists who are with us. I have a wonderful group of people here today. I would like to just mention that RBCM at Home started in March when our museum and archive closed due to the pandemic. And it was an opportunity for us to talk to staff about what they were working on from home. Now that even though the museum is reopened, we've continued this program as a way of staying connected with people at home or school around the province. This program and previous ones have been recorded, and you can find them on the Royal BC Museum's YouTube channel. Today is our first out-of-province program. While travel is not allowed into the Northwest Territories right now, we are making a virtual visit to Nahanni National Park Reserve, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Located on the territory of the Dehcho First Nation, the park is situated on the continental divide between the Yukon and the Northwest Territories. We will learn more about the park and the archaeological discoveries made there from our three panelists today. George Tsetso, a traditional knowledge holder and member of the Nahanni Consensus Team, Donalee, Parks Canada archaeologist, and Kevin Gedling, the Partnering, Engagement, and Communications Officer. Welcome, everyone.
Hi there. Thanks for having us.
Oh, it's great. Now, Donalee is going to start by sharing her screen, and we'll get you, Kevin, to give us some information about the park itself.
For sure, for sure. Well, thanks again very much for the opportunity to Kim and Jenny, of course, for helping us behind the scenes to get ready. Yeah, so it's actually really exciting to share with you a little bit of some recent work done in the Nahanni National Park Reserve, and to introduce you folks to kind of a relatively unknown corner of the park reserve that you may not have heard about, a place called Gahnįhthah Mįe. So I'm joined by George Tsetso, who was already introduced. It's important to know he's been on the cooperative management board for Nahanni for something like 20 years. So there's a huge amount of experience coming from George being a part of this. So I'm quite honored to have the chance to work with him on this. And of course, Donalee, she's an archaeologist in our office in Winnipeg. She's going to talk a bit more about, her pretty cool background and, her approach to this whole project that they had in Nahanni. But just before we get into their work, it's just a little bit of a chance to introduce the park. We'll take a quick look at how things are going to lay out today. So first of all, we're just going to talk a little bit about Nahanni National Park Reserve, where it is, and how it's situated relative to most of you folks, assuming you're joining us from BC, but who knows. Gahnįhthah Mįe is a location, again, within Nahanni National Park Reserve, and we'll talk a little bit about this particular corner of the park and what makes it particularly special. They're going to talk a little bit more about what was found, the actual artifacts, and kind of what they mean and what they represent, both kind of in a scientific sense and more of in a spiritual and cultural sense as well. And of course, the three of us, we're open to questions right after that. And if you're someone who likes to get a question off to us later, there's ways to do that through Royal BC Museum and through Kim and their team as well. So we're happy to take them later too if you need. Next. So Nahanni National Park Reserve, as you can see again, is located in the Northwest Territories, right up nestled against the Yukon NWT border. Just a little bit north of the northern east corner of BC there. It's an absolutely breathtaking park, and calling it a park probably doesn't really do the land justice. It's fantastic. It's about 31,000 square kilometers, bigger than many small countries on Earth. And it's the third largest national park in Canada. It was expanded a few years ago to its current size as we see it on the map today. Next. So Nahanni National Park Reserve, when you think about Nahanni, for those of you who are more familiar with it, this is probably what you're thinking about. This is Virginia Falls, the very famous, iconic, absolutely spectacular waterfall. And having stood at the side of this waterfall twice, I can tell you there's really no other place like this in Canada, maybe a few in the world, nothing at all like it. And it's an absolutely breathtaking place. There's a lot more to Nahanni than the Virginia Falls place. It's actually called Gahnįhthah, and it's a beautiful landscape where most of the park's visitation comes in every year through flight seeing tours. It's a very remote place. It's an hour or two flight from the nearest communities of Fort Simpson, but it's a very, very remote corner of the park. Busy place to visit, but it's also, like I say, just something that is spectacular, but it's not the only really cool corner of that park. Next. Okay, great. So in Nahanni, it ranges from big, broad valleys to epic alpine hiking and climbing. This is a scene from a place called Cirque of the Unclimbables that's available just above a beautiful area called Glacier Lake. Nahanni National Park Reserve includes all kinds of Canadian mountain landscapes that, it makes other mountain landscapes seem really small by comparison when you have a chance to visit Nahanni. The park has these high altitude glaciers, big broad valley bottoms, and the park is riddled with all kinds of mountains and plateaus, amazing sedimentary and igneous rock formations, incredible geology, and some of the deepest and most elaborate karst and canyon formations that you'll find in any mountain landscape anywhere. Some of the country's deepest cave formations are found in the Nahanni National Park Reserve. And much more important, this landscape with its towering cliffs and huge canyons is the heartland for the Decho Dene, and has been for them and many other groups from the Yukon and the Northwest Territories for thousands of years.
I noticed when Kevin was talking, I think there's a little bit of a delay from when I'm flipping the slides. So if I'm talking ahead of a slide, if somebody could just let me know that that I have to wait a few seconds, because on my screen they're showing up right away. So the site that we're going to be talking about today is located on a lake called Gahnįhthah Mįe.
Hello.
Gahnįhthah Mįe is about half a kilometer from the South Nahanni River between the Cirque of the Unclimbables and Gahnįhthah. There you go, George.
We're over to you, George.
Oh, hi. Okay. At the beginning, in this area, when the world was created, the laws of nature were off a little bit. So back in those days, the animals are dominating the humans. So the creators sent somebody down called Gahnįhthah to straighten out nature as you see it today. And from the elders and all the stories that have been passed on from generations, the home of Gahnįhthah was in that area, the Tufa monks. So it's a very spiritual area for the people, not just for the Decho people, but the Sahtu people, the Yukon people, and part of northern BC. And so, and a lot of people used it as a hunting route. But anyways, it's like the Gahnįhthah was here to straighten nature out as he did, and as people went by with respect to the area. People would go and pay respects with tobacco or berries or something that belonged to them, just as a respect going by the area. And this includes the animals. The birds bring pieces of rabbits and stuff like that there, and they leave it along the river on the Tufa Mounts as a gift for the spirit of Jambareja, which is pretty amazing. Till this day, it still happens. So it's something that's been ongoing for the beginning of time, and it makes it a very spiritual area. And a lot of the people that are in the area, they go there to check the water to see if you have a good future. So if there's lots of water there, that means it's a good omen. And then if there's less water, then it's in the opposite. So a lot of people would go in the area. If they're hunting in the area, they would stop and spend a few days there just to pay respects to the area as they move down the river. And in early 2000, the Tsetso First Nation and Canada started negotiating for the land with the land Tsetso process. And part of that process was getting a co-management board together. In 2001 was put together to co-manage the park. And one of the main visions of this from the elders was having to protect the water. And as the park original size was too small, it wasn't capturing the water. So the park was expanded to the size you see today, so we could save the water for generations to come. So for the younger generation, 200 years from now, the water will still be there. So I think that the elders that saw that were thinking way down the road, like 500 years from now, and the water is still flowing. And so that's kind of the background on it. And it's and people are still going down the river and still paying homage to the area every time they get a chance to be in the area. So it's very connected to the people of the land. Everybody thinks you can take the land out of the people, but you can't. The people and the land are connected, and everything is all together. So it's a very honorable thing for me to have that information. To pass this information on. It's very nice.
Thank you, George. Donalee. Have we lost you, Donalee?
I think Donalee's there. You just muted right now, Donalee, so you just have to unmute yourself.
Technology.
Done it.
Okay. I think George is going to talk about his find that he discovered in 2017. Are you there, George?
Yes. Okay. 2017. Part of the co-management board was once a year or every other year or so, we would go out on the land and do meetings on the land. It's a 2-day meeting. We'll find locations within the park to do meetings. And this one particular time we were in Gahnįhthah Mįe, and we did the whole meeting and everything, and we're all waiting for the plane. The weather wasn't in our favor, so we had time to just mosey around, look around, and spend some time just looking at the rocks and stuff like that. and I thought, well, hey, I'll go find a nice little sharp rock, and and we can have it in the cabin for display. So when I was looking at it, and I found that spear, that part, and I wasn't intended to be such a big significant find, but it was after we documented everything, we recorded everything, and that was kind of the ball rolling from there. So it was pretty nice. It was good because it had lots of stories behind that as well. So it kind of gives you a timeline of how long the people have been there in the parkway before the park even existed. So it's nice to have that history with the area, and and the connections it make with all the stories I've been told growing up on the land, and that's kind of a little piece of the puzzle for me. So it's pretty nice. Yeah, so the river is located about 1 kilometer or 2 from the lake. So it's about a 40-minute walk from the cabin. So it's a really nice hike, all pine, really nice area to wake up. You wake up in the morning, this is what you're gonna see. So it's kind of surreal. See all this area, and to realize that you're saving this for future generations. It's pretty nice.
It's beautiful. So you saw this artifact kind of by accident. You realized it was something important or significant in some way. And then Donalee, how did you find out about George's discovery, and what were the next steps? We'll just get you to unmute yourself.
I don't know why it's automatically muting me. So I'm with when anything cultural is found, like archaeological artifacts or features are found in Parks Canada Heritage Place, the Parks Canada archaeologists get involved. So the park contacted us and sent us the photographs that they had taken, and we arranged to get funding through the park to be able to go out and do an archaeological investigation. Because George found the artifacts on the surface, we wanted to learn more about the site. They were eroding out near the cabin, and we wanted to see if there was still intact deposits of the people who were living there in the past. So 3 of us went out in 2018, and we did test excavation to look for intact, like to try and figure out how big the site actually is. We wanted to know, were the artifacts George found part of a larger archaeological site that could tell us a story about the past? We also wanted to protect the site from further impact, as the artifacts, that we did find came to light through erosion. So what we did is we excavated small test units with trowels to delineate where there was buried cultural deposits. All the soil that we removed through excavation from the test units is screened through 1/4-inch mesh, so that we can make sure that we're collecting all of the artifacts that might be present in the soil deposits. Everything that we do is documented in detail with field notes, photographs, maps, and drawings. This is so we can understand how what we find relates to each other, and then we can recreate the site when we're doing our post-field analysis. So as often happens, as George was saying, you never know when the float plane is going to come and get you with weather delays. But in our case, we were hoping for a weather delay so we could spend some more time at the site. But of course, on the last day of the project, as the float plane was landing to pick us up, we discovered 2 obsidian flakes in one of our test units. The flakes were associated with other artifacts and ash and charcoal from a hearth or a campfire. So we got permission from the cooperative management team and had some of the stone artifacts analyzed for possible protein residues to tell us what the tools may have been used for. So one of the obsidian flakes, the one that's pictured on the top right, had canid or wolf, dog, fox residue on it. And the one artifact pictured below on the bottom right had mountain goat or mountain sheep residue. We were also able to date the hearth by submitting charcoal that was identified as juniper charcoal to a lab to do radiocarbon dating. And the date came back between 1200 and 1300 years ago. So this test unit was just a few meters away from where the artifacts were that George had found in 2017. Because of the significance of having datable material relating to a projectile point, we decided to go back and do further excavation. We wanted to learn more about the site. We wanted to open up a bigger area in association with where the obsidian was found and where George found his artifacts, to learn more about this site that's over 1,000 years old. So when we went back, we had, again, a small crew of people, and George and his wife, Anna, were able to join us for part of the excavation, which was really exciting. In this case, in 2019, we brought out the survey equipment and we surveyed in 1 meter square excavation units. And I don't know, George, if you want to say a few words about your time excavating with us.
Yeah, I think my wife had come and wanted to volunteer just so she could spend some time out on the land, and I said, sure, let's do it. So we went out, and I've been to the area a lot of times, and so I was already used to it, and it was kind of her first trip. And she was just in awe every day. She got up and she just kept bringing it up every day, and I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm here. It was so comical. And she just kept pinching herself, and it was so funny. And then a week after we got home, she was still digging around in the yard. So it was pretty comical. It was like, and she still talks about it. She has all the pictures, and it was really it was a really good experience for her, and she really enjoyed it. So it was nice. It's her backyard, so it's pretty nice. We give her a chance to see that. It was really nice.
So what we did in 2019 is we opened up a bigger area because we were digging the larger excavation units, and we focused it around that test unit. You can see the little square box there where it says test unit 2018. And we opened up a number of units right next to it. And what we found was that the obsidian and that tool that had the mountain goat and mountain sheep residue on was part of a larger hearth. It's kind of hard, I think, maybe to make out, but I've circled it in red. So part of the hearth had fire-cracked rock, and there were some other discarded tools and ash and charcoal associated with it. And one of the other tools is circled in yellow, and it's pictured on the top right. This is a neat little, what we call expedient tool. It's minimally modified, but it has a lot of use wear on the tip. And it was submitted for residue analysis as well, and it had bird residue. So possible of 2 different bird families. It's either, or maybe both, where they use this tool on 2 different types of species of birds. So it tested positive for ptarmigan and also a bird from the duck, goose, swan family. As well, we collected soil samples from the hearth and water screened them in the lab through geological sieves with fine screen, as small as 0.5 millimeters or window screen size. And this allows us to collect very tiny artifacts and organic remains that we look at we sort through the residue from the screens and using a microscope. And in those samples, we found more charcoal, tiny fragments of burnt animal bone, like that one that's pictured on the bottom right. And we also found burnt conifer needles and cone scales, likely from spruce. So some of the other tools that artifacts that we found during our investigation were representing a variety of activities that help us interpret, what people were doing at the site. Stone tool manufacture was represented. There was waste material made out of different kinds of stone materials that people left behind from making, repairing, or sharpening stone tools. Of course, George's projectile point base, a midsection that he found, is actually from an atlatl or a dart thrower. The point was broken, likely during use, and then it was discarded or misplaced at the site and left behind. The invention of the atlatl system changed the way people hunted. It allowed a projectile to be thrown farther and with more force. Another artifact type that we found was a little scraper that was broken. Scrapers were used for a variety of purposes. They were used as woodworking tools, for hide working, and also fish processing. So for gutting and scaling fish. This style of scraper would have been hafted on a bone, wood, or antler handle with sinew. The pictures on the right show two different hafting techniques. The top one is a wooden handle, and the bottom one is on antler. And of course, you have to have certain conditions, either dry, like a dry cave, or really wet, like a bog, or in ice, in some of the glacier work that archaeologists are working at, to get preservation of some types of organic materials. So usually when it comes to stone tools, we find the stone part of the tool, but if it was hafted onto a handle, the organic parts of that usually don't preserve in the environment that we were working in Nahanni. Something else that, of course, you often get at campsites or at archaeological sites are cutting implements. And you get different styles of cutting implements, some that are more high-end, like the one on the left, which is the other artifact George found along with that projectile dart point. That's a little tip of a stone knife that would have been hafted on a handle. The artifact in the middle is what we call an expedient tool. And you can see there's a big chunk taken out of it kind of in the top center. That's a heat spall because it was located associated with that hearth or that campfire. And if you look on the two sides of this tool, you can see it looks kind of like a sawtooth, kind of jagged edge, and that's from use. So those little flakes come off as the person's using it. If you look at it under a microscope, there's use wear on there. And if you look at the top and the bottom of the artifact, you can see sort of a straight edge. It was broken at either end. So again, people were just making quick, you need something sharp to cut a variety of things in our day-to-day life. Everything from, possibly cutting meat to plants, cutting feathers, woodworking for possibly, making the dart points or handles and that kind of thing for other types of tools. And the last little cutting implement that we're showing here today is the one on the right. And that's the one I mentioned earlier that was found a number of years ago on the ground surface. So we knew there was an archaeological site, but we didn't know how significant it was until George discovered the dart point. These two artifacts on the next slide are wood, bone, and antler working tools. So it's really interesting because these two artifacts are made from the same they would have been made from the same rock. They have a really distinct, if you look, that white kind of line running through it is a little quartz vein. Both the tools are what we would call gravers, or tools with a modified tip, and they were used to score or bore into a hard material like a wood or bone or antler. And the tool on the right was kind of a multifunctional tool. It had another purpose, and that's as a spoke shave. And what a spoke shave is if you look at the top right, you can see that little rounded or curved indent in the top of the tool. That was used for scraping off bark and straightening wood shafts for tools or weapons. Another really interesting artifact that we found is an anvil. This anvil stone split where it's pitted from use. So the point of impact is the depression where you can see little kind of impact flakes that have come off and use wear, especially as you look deeper into the hole. This anvil may have been used for a variety of purposes, such as making stone tools, fire drilling, shaping and smoothing antler, bone, or wood to be used for other types of tools. The site certainly had a very interesting toolkit. Most of the stone artifacts that we found at the site were expedient type tools made from cobbles collected from local glacial deposits that are present around the lake. However, there were some artifacts that came from two different quarry sources, one north of Gahnįhthah Mįe and the other south. So to the north is a place called Tate Lake, which has a outcrops of a material called Tertiary Hills clinker, which is the little flake that's on the top on the right side of the slide. And Mounted Zidza to the north is a quarry for obsidian. Obsidian has a really unique fingerprint chemical composition, so we can source where in the Rocky Mountains or the mountain ranges that the quarry source comes from. So as the crow flies, Tate Lake, so the Tertiary Hills clinker source is 300 kilometers north of the site, and the obsidian is 500 kilometers south of the site. So we don't know if people visited the quarries directly, the people that were camping at Gahnįhthah Mįe, or if they acquired the stone through other means. And we do know that people traveled great distances in the past over vast landscapes on a seasonal basis. So it wouldn't be unusual to think that people actually visited the quarry sites themselves. Travelers from all over visited the Tufa Mounds and traveled in this area. Some groups traveled the river, others traveled in the mountain passes. From Gahnįhthah Mįe, you can see Cirque of the Unclimbables circled in red in this photograph. George and I did an archaeological investigation at the Cirque in 2013, where we found a 2,000-year-old campsite. George, do you want to take it from here?
Yes, I think if I remember correctly, I think that was one of my first trips up the Fairy Meadows, and it was quite the eye-opening experience for me, because I've never gone that far into the mountains in that area, and it was so it was all kind of a learning experience for me. So I was really intrigued by the artifacts and stuff like that, and that kind of brings you back thousands of years, finding this kind of stuff in the ground. It's mind-boggling what sits in the ground and tells a story. It's pretty amazing.
Well, those are absolutely beautiful pictures. Donalee, if that's the
just
end.
to think,
Go ahead, George, sorry.
Just to think, my granddaughters are going to be you know, they're going to be there with their grandkids somewhere down the road and see all this artifacts and stuff you found years from now, and it's like a time capsule for them when they see that. And so I think that's pretty amazing. It's like locking something in a time warp, and it just sits there forever. It's pretty nice.
I think they'll also be proud of the work you've been doing, George, to help preserve these areas and to help us understand them more. Donalee, thank you so much. We'll get you to stop sharing your screen so we can see all the panelists again. And there's a question that came in during, while you were chatting about all the different tools, Donalee. There were so many different types. Pamela is wondering, how do you figure out what all those tools were when all you've got is those little shards or those little pieces to work from?
But we know from a number of ways from studying to be an archaeologist, but you look at how they're manufactured. So if you look at the artifact, some stone tools were flaked, others were ground or pecked. And so we look at the flaking patterns on the artifacts. We look at the edges of the tools to see the use wear on them, to see how they were used. Again, one of the new techniques is to look at residue analysis, which is really changing our interpretation of the tools. We've done residue analysis on those little end scrapers like the one pictured in the presentation, and discovered in sites in Nahanni and elsewhere that people were actually using these little scrapers for fish processing. So yes, it's a matter of just looking at the use wear on the artifacts. I mean, if you look at those tools and laid them on the ground in a bunch of cobbles, you would notice that it looked different. That what it looks like isn't something that could happen naturally. That it's been culturally modified.
Amazing. And as you're saying, your experience of just looking at so many different artifacts and objects helps you identify some of those things that are unique. So George, speaking of which, you mentioned how you just sort of, you stumbled upon this projectile point. You just sort of saw it there. What stood out about it when you saw it? Why did you know something was unique about that rock?
I think my first conclusion was, well, I was looking for something unique, and I've heard stories of a long time ago. People find arrowheads all the time. Anything that's pointed or something, you know, like it was a point of something at some point. So I think that was kind of the thing that caught me was the material itself was different than all the other rocks in the area. So it was darker. It had a little shine on it. So that's what kind of stuck out for me, and I think that's kind of what got my curiosity going.
Was that projectile point also obsidian?
No, it's made out of shale.
Okay, and is that something that is more commonly found in the area?
There's a lot of the artifacts that we find in Nahanni are made out of shale. It's a common material in the in areas of the Northwest Territories to have artifacts made out of siliceous shale material. So that would be locally available. Like, we don't have a specific quarry.
Okay, thank you. Speaking of local, you mentioned you did find some fish residue on one of those tools. A question here from Lola Hawk. Could you share what kind of fish are found in the Nahanni? George, do you know what kind of fish people might have been catching? George, do you have anything about the kind of fish that are in the Nahanni?
Well, I think back in those days, fish was like any fish you caught, I think, was edible. So it was probably a treat at some point. So I couldn't tell you exactly like what kind of fish was in the water back then, because I don't have that knowledge, but I'm sure it was pretty tasty. Just as it's always been back till today, just because I think it's a good way to look at it is that if you save the water for the next 300, 400 years, the fish will still be there then. So the fish is going to taste as good back then as it is today, back in the future. Who knows? Like, I think it's a plus. With this knowledge, it's going to be saved.
Right. And what we might be able to learn from it in the future could be different than what we're able to learn right now, even as our technologies change. Now, speaking of technology, that projectile point you found, Donalee said was from an atlatl. And Lisa Tsetso, with the same last name as you, is saying that Cole, who is 10 years old, is asking what type of wood would have been attached to that spearhead. Donalee, do you know what kind of wood that might have been attached to the spearhead?
We didn't find any wood or wood residues. We did submit the projectile point for residue analysis as well, but there was nothing on it. So you want to have something that's relatively straight. So for instance, Saskatoons are a type of wood, and willow shafts for smaller handles, but we don't know for this particular dart point what the wood shaft was made out of.
Okay, well, a good question, Cole. Maybe we'll find out more about that in the future too. The final question I'll have for today is from Jindra. Jindra is saying, thank you for the interesting talk. And Jindra's wondering, where are the articles that were found? Where are they now?
The artifacts that we collected from the site are in the Parks Canada lab facility in Winnipeg right now. So when we bring stuff out from the site, we bring it back to the lab to be able to analyze it, photograph it, document it, and it's put into storage. Some of the items will likely go back up to the park for exhibit, and we're hoping to do an edukit of the items. So we'll make replicas of them, and so people can handle them on site, on the land, depending on what interpretive programming gets developed.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, all of you. We have 3 panelists in 3 different time zones. It's just been great that everyone has been able to come together. We want to thank you all also for joining us. And if you joined us late or you missed something and you want to go back, this is being recorded and you can find it on the Royal BC Museum's YouTube channel. So please have a look there. The Royal BC Museum has reopened and we are ready to welcome people back. You can find out more on our website about time, tickets, and exhibits. We will be continuing our at-home kids, and at outside for the foreseeable future. And links for all these programs are posted on the Royal BC Museum's website. Next week, March 2nd, our Curator of Art and Images, Dr. India Rael Young, will speak to us about the art collection in the BC Archives, how it got there, and what it tells us about British Columbia. I hope you'll join us. Until then, take care of yourselves and one another. Thank you.